so much for being in attendance today. So we're just gonna start off by introducing ourselves. And I'll start. My name is Michaela Elise Terrell.
Hello, my name is Jefferson.
My name is Ade Uma.
My name is Shayla Abdon.
Hi, my name is Philip Dunwoody. My name is Isaiah Massey.
And we are the panelists for today. And there was actually a bit of a mix-up. We actually had a panel yesterday, and the titles of the two panels were switched. So this panel, telling Black stories in fantasy worlds, is also going to act as somewhat of a roundtable for Black comic artists and creative. So I know the table isn't round, but like if you've seen those actors on actors videos, it's gonna be sort of similar to that, like artists on artists. So this is really just gonna be an open conversation, open up for questions as well. But it's really just gonna be more so like maybe like an insightful experience of us just telling our own personal stories and how they come out and are conveyed through our storytelling and what we do. Today's presentation.
Everybody gather around.
If you can read that. So, just a little introduction into this. And like synopsis I submitted. I was just saying like the magic of storytelling really lies within the differences of our personal experiences. And I was just saying that with everything at our fingertips now, it seems like we should have more access to works that accurately represent us or represent us in ways that we've never seen before. And we're starting to see that a lot more now as it's easier for creatives to like jumpstart and like campaign for their own projects to get funded instead of it being like some like big corporate higher up like trying to resonate with the Black community or something like that. So today we're just about to share our experiences, crafting story worlds that are relevant to people of color, and just an insightful session into the possibilities of diversifying fiction. Okay, all right, well, so getting into it, I really just want to start off with the inspiration, because that's where it all starts, like where we get inspired, like whether it's by the things we see or like read or the stories that we consume. I just wanted to ask you guys what characters in different media and TV shows and series inspired you, and what would you have maybe liked to have seen growing up?
Growing up, the characters that inspired me were heavily anime based. I wasn't too big on like westernized media. I was cool with like Spider-Man, maybe like a few Marvel stuff, but my parents come from Jamaica, and I remember at a party one time, it's like an adult party. I'm going through the rooms and I see Inuyasha playing, like VHS tape. That was like one of those sparks into like a different type of, I guess, art that exists besides like traditional cartoons. So I'll say early animes I came on Toonami basically were my influences to create or springboard into the character.
I like to piggyback what you said. Nami was my thing. Like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Young Moon, just the whole everything that was aired. I remember coming home from school like 3 o'clock, I would skip my homework. I would skip everything just to get on to I had to. And of course, I can't forget about Pokemon. Can't. So yeah, I'm like heavily anime inspired as well. I also want to talk about the Boondocks. The Boondocks is a heavy inspiration, like heavy, like you see it within my work right here. So,
you know, I grew up. My father, I would read a lot of the comic books that he had. He was really into comic books, so I read a lot of Silver Surfer, Thor, Hulk, X-Men, and so I grew up on Marvel. I love Marvel. And then I kind of got into anime more when I was about 10. More so starting with like Full Metal Alchemist, and shows like that. Even Avatar: Last Airbender. That's not an anime. Debate. But we're going. We'll just roll with it. But those were like heavy inspirations, and even like more recently, some of my inspiration has been Jujutsu Kaisen, wearing a shirt right now. This heavily inspired me to start writing. I'm kind of new to it. I've been able to write and stuff for about maybe a year and a half now, but just growing up on these comics and understanding and relating with these characters has really inspired me throughout. So I have a good balance of like Western and Eastern types of animation and comics.
Yeah, I would probably say that when you kind of like take inventory of your current work, no matter if it's like writing or art, you kind of like start to see those inspirations. So for me growing up, definitely in the like anime, like superhero track, but then also like that early 2000s like Disney animation. So like when I look at my work, the visuals are very like everybody's kind of saying East meets West, where you have kind of like the big, is it Disney eyes, is it anime eyes, just kind of a hybrid of the two. So definitely things like that. And then I want to say more recent things. I just love all of the very like strong and both physically diverse and mentally diverse, even like princesses. Oh, see, there we go again. So things like Moana, things like Maribel, the Turning Red movie that came out recently. Just like showing that these different stories are very cross or divergent among cultures, but depending on what culture you come from, those stories that everybody goes through can look very different. I'm so envious of kids right now because I think of that TV show Craig of the Creek, and literally you see every single type of kid who have interests of these things all literally converging into their own world. And then even the artists and creators of the show themselves just having their own experiences that we almost didn't, like most of the majority of people maybe didn't think that somebody who was black or brown would have, but no, they definitely do. And so they're showing that on the platform, which is really, really helpful. So that was probably what I would say.
I'm gonna start off with a question for you. How many people here know Thor? How many people here know Shango? Yeah, Shango is the black god of thunder and lightning.
Yep.
And I was fortunate to have grown up in Nigeria. I find it interesting that for a black audience, when we're talking about inspiration, the stories are there. If you look at the entirety of the black population of the planet, we have the African Americans, we have Africans, and we have the Afro-Caribbean. And there's just so many stories in those populations where if you're a creator, it's easy to look into any of those populations and draw characters from them. I decided to write a story about Shango, the black god of thunder and lightning, because I felt like there's not enough of the spotlight being cast on this story. And if you look at the media still today, you find that there's just a lot of spotlights cast on one segment of the population and not enough on not enough on the brown and black population. So the stories are there, the inspirations are there. Growing up, what inspired me were stories that my grandma would tell me about some of these figures. And what I found interesting was that even though Shango, for instance, was a 14th century African king in the Oyo Kingdom of what is now southwestern Nigeria, he's worshipped today in Brazil, Panama, Haiti, some populations, but like people just don't know this thing. So the stories are there, the inspirations are there, and that's where I got it.
Thank you. For myself, I feel like I try to be a bit more classically trained. It's just good old-fashioned Dungeons and Dragons for me. The idea of going up from the World South, roll back to South, where back in my day, those books were very hard to find. And the idea of CBS had a show, Dungeons and Dragons, and through that and Star Trek, I got a chance to get the red basic set. I think it was a precursor for like the second edition. And just being able to write my own stories and just wanting to make a fantastic space and place where I could make characters that look like myself, or at least in my imagination and what I could draw. And so in writing Dungeons and Dragons and collecting Marvel comics in a fair amount, the idea was really to create fantastic spaces that not only I could be in, but I can invite other folks. And to, as a compliment to your conversation, the idea of creating an African fantasy series and setting is what I really focus a lot of my time on, because I didn't have a direct connection to African or diaspora initially. The idea was to put some of the history that I would find with the Dahomey Amazon community. And so that's where my first comic book, my main comic book, Sorghum and Spear, really got started. So the idea was to create a tabletop game that was a little bit of culture, a little bit of history, but something that, again, let us be ourselves. And so that's where I felt like there was my inspiration.
Well, thank you. That was really insightful. I love hearing that, because that's where it all starts. Like when you get inspired, when you're young and impressionable, and you're like, oh my gosh, like that character is just like so much like me, or like whatever it may be. But for me, it was like Winx Club, and I love Teen Titans. Like I love Teen Titans, and I think I gravitated to the series with like a good group of friends, because I just always wanted like a friend group. I was like, oh my, I'm gonna have like this perfect friend group when I get in high school. That didn't really happen, but yeah. But thank you guys. So moving on, when it comes to crafting and creating your characters, what were some key things that you wanted to include in their persona? And then what were some things that you wanted to avoid or make sure that your character wasn't portrayed or seen in a certain way?
So I'm currently working on 2 titles right now, and I'll speak on the character for the first title that I created. I've been working on that for about 16 years now. His name is Fang, and he's a 16-year-old boy, and it's a shonen. But I don't want it to be a typical shonen. I want him to have his underdog story, but I also don't want it to be a typical victimhood of like the world is bad or good. I want to create moral ambiguities to challenge thinking. And I craft these characters outside of myself because I want to offer different points of views into things that can bridge gaps between disparities and misunderstandings between cultures and mediums. So one thing I try to avoid with creating my characters is to put too much of myself into them, and to remember that they're their own people, and with that they have their own history and energy that I try to respect and represent properly through my experience.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm still low-key trying to figure this out. Even my 2 books right here, they were both successful on Kickstarter. Both of the characters were using CJ as a typical love story type thing. CJ is super scared to talk to Renisha. And eventually they come together in this world and get superpowers and stuff like that. As far as like stuff I try to avoid, virtue signaling, basically anything that has to do with politics and stuff like that. I just try my best to keep that away from it right now. But other than that, that's about it. I can't think of anything else.
I think for me, when I'm creating a character, I can speak for some of the characters I'm writing. I often, I guess, antithesis to what you said. I often put a lot of myself, not a lot, but I always put a little sprinkle of my own experiences and myself in each character and different aspects of myself, both positive and negative. And I think, crafting a character, the most important thing is that they're human. Whether they be anything, it could be a space alien, it doesn't matter. You need to make sure they have a sense of humanity and realism to them. I think one of the things I guess I avoid making when I make a character is making them too, especially when it comes to a main character, too perfect. And they can do it all and they solve every problem. Sometimes they fail and that's it. And the world sometimes crashes, but getting back up and doing what you need to do in order to succeed or finish your goals. That's kind of what I would say.
I would probably say that I like to take from like my own personal struggles and even like, for example, like my background and highlight that, and it depends, of course, because I do agree with what you were saying, because it's like makes it maybe easier to kind of have less of an attachment to your character. That way you can maybe like put them through crap. Yeah, exactly, right. Because you don't want to make your character exactly like you, and then you're like, oh, but I don't want them to struggle, or I don't want them to like go through things. But for me, like, I kind of feel like with diversity in media, you're doing the idea of writing what you know, but you're taking it like to the next level. So for me, for example, lately I've had a lot of questioning about like what's my path, what am I going to do, like am I running out of time, extra things like that. So how can your character have those same struggles and feelings that are initially very human feelings to have, and take them in a realm of fantasy or a realm of sci-fi and things in those areas. So I like to kind of write what I know in the like human struggle that everybody can really connect with. Things that I try to avoid, I would also say just like trying to keep everything exactly in line. Maybe your character is a little bit of an asshole. Excuse my language, but maybe that's the case, because in essence, like I see characters, and so I have a comic right now, and it's got two protagonists, and one of them is like the very like shy, fearful, self-conscious part of me, and then the other is like the kind of alter ego, what I wish that I was, what I like am currently striving to be. So like sometimes I kind of like to see those two sides of myself kind of like battle it out, and that of course creates conflict that you probably have within yourself right now. So other than avoiding, I try to include areas that are maybe not unique to me, and you always want to like touch it with like a grain of salt. So if it's like a type of character that is not you, maybe you're not a person of color, maybe you're not somebody who identifies as queer or trans and things like that. Just making sure that you are being very sensitive to that character, and even maybe reaching out to somebody who you personally know and trust, who you can run these characters by. And of course, if somebody were to reach out to you for that, then you would extend that
Well, so the character I'm writing about is now worshipped as God, but he used to be a king. So the story is basically trying to get him from when he was a king to how he became a god. But it's also a fictional story. So I have to, toe this line where I don't offend the people that exalt him as a god, but also try to cast a spotlight on the fact that this guy did exist. So what I've tried to do is try as much as possible to make him human. Make him flawed like we all are, and really project the pressures he would have felt when he was ruling his kingdom, and the how would I put this? How he would have had to negotiate, allies and his enemies and all that stuff. So I guess when you're dealing with a complex character like that, I just try to make sure on one hand I'm not offending the people that exalt him, and at the same time I'm trying to make him as human as possible.
Absolutely, and for myself, my main character, protagonist in my comic Sorghum and Spear, is a young farm girl named Mozzie. So, as a writer, I'll take a premise, take a step back. As a dungeon master, my idea for characters is to see how much punishment these people can take. But I think, but then you want to be realistic, and for our characters like this, particularly because this is a young girl that was growing up in a rural farm. Though that was not my personal experience, the idea was to try and be appreciative of that circumstance. So at least in the story, to not make it where it was not a chance that she didn't have a family, that we didn't take the time to showcase that the character was a little bit more robust than just a kind of an archetype. And again, to be appreciative of what it took to make a world that would have been something to lose, right? So it was really intentional to try to have people that had that experience be part of our editing team, part of our art team, be part of our early readers, so that again there was a space of appreciation that we could get first, and always use as a resource that we could really navigate the path of the character forward.
Thank you all for sharing. I feel like we touched on a lot. I feel like a lot of different aspects and things to avoid, like just in the story as a whole. But moving on to maybe a more deeper note, I feel like when we turn to different forms of media and entertainment, a lot of times it is for like an escape. Like you want to experience something that's fantastic or like just really different from our world. So in your world, did you make it more reflective of like a positive or a negative view and outlook on society? And what were your intentions with this choice and like overall messaging that you want to convey?
So for the two stories that I'm working on, one currently I'm working on called Idolscape. It's based off of Instagram, so if you abbreviate it, it's still IG. It's the first virtual reality social media, and I'm using that as a device for all my disdain for like celebrity culture, idol worship, and like vanity, and I put that in the main character. And basically, becoming an idol is like getting a blue check on Instagram, so it changes your life. And the main character doesn't want followers, and he doesn't want to be followed, but he has to become an idol. But he has to become an idol to get his family out of poverty. So that's part of his struggle to figure out how does he even want to participate, but also get to his goal. And I want that to be a critique on everything in terms of where the social media landscape and our cyberspace is going. So that's like a negative depiction. And for the first one I mentioned, I was about 16 years old. That's like my Dragon Ball Z, a magnum opus. And that one is more lighter. So with these stories, it is escapism, but for us as the creators, it's like immersion. And so when you're creating these stories, you're in the worlds that you're creating. And it's important to not to forget that it's just an escape. And you're supposed to use it as a storytelling device. Because it's easy to get jaded by your own story and identifying with your own character. So for the two stories, it's like bad, it's not bad, but maybe negative critique on society, psychology, uplifting. So I'm gonna work myself into like a grumpy space and then come out like sunshine.
My two books right here, they're more of a, I guess you would say, a reflective society, aside from the alien invasions that happen in the book. Other than that, yeah, it's more of a reflective. There's good people in it, there's bad people, there's good people, there's great zone. And that's just basically how real life is. So I guess you couldn't really call it escapism because that's what real life is. I'm pretty sure there's some good people in the dream, some bad people in the dream, some good people in the dream. That's what it is.
I hope there's no bad people in this room.
And everybody's done something.
Done something about it. For me, my story, that I've heard, I'm sure the Seven Swords. It's something that I've worked on, again, for like about a couple of years I've been writing it. Oftentimes, I more so focus on different aspects and different angles of society and how they affect a character. Oftentimes, with escapism, I believe that you can escape into a world, but there will always be conflict in the story. And oftentimes, that's the perfect moment to create a critique of society and the problems in it. And this, I usually more so focus on maybe the darker aspects of humanity and society and the wrongdoings that they do. As well as my own personal experiences living in a society, being black. And I guess that's how I would describe it and how I would write
I kind of see it as, you can't really escape some of these, like you mentioned, like with conflict, you can't really escape, a type of struggle, no matter if it's like an oppressive struggle of some kind. I feel like I watched an interview with Jordan Peele, and he was talking about the new movie that he made, Nope. And the interviewer, they were like, you've really made a name for yourself when it comes down to like depicting race and blah, 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 blah. And he kind of like didn't really dwell on it. He was just like, race exists all around us. Like, it just is, It's not that, you can really ignore it at this point. But even seeing how he portrays characters, the most recent movie, and I'm not going to put any spoilers out there if you haven't seen it by now, but the recent movie, it's like, you could kind of see what they're going through and identify that with anybody. You've got David versus Goliath, no matter what you have. But when you see, like, what's in front of you, you can see how, like, that oppressive thing is gonna cause for you to just really have to kind of see how that relates in your life, is what I'm trying to say. So I feel like even in, say, for example, Star Wars, you have, one could even say, like, the droids are an oppressed class of beings. Like, you really can. So it's always gonna exist somewhere within it, but like with Star Wars, it is a very fantasy escape. It's this place that's unlike our own, but these oppressive natures still exist in some way. For me, I like to show, like, human struggle in various ways. I also really like depicting very surreal worlds. I like, sci-fi, cyberpunk type of things. And, you can't help but end up sometimes in a cyberpunk style world without it becoming somewhat of a dystopia, which then you're like, okay, well, how did we get here? How did society get here? But with the story that I'm coming up with right now, you know, they live in this kind of cyberpunk, slightly dystopian world, but they just live life and they do what they have to do despite all of that crazy crap out of there. And one could honestly say that's what it's like right now. Like, insert whatever issues going on, but we're still going to work, we're still clocking in, we're still having fun with our friends and family. So yeah, I guess it is kind of like an escapism where it's like in the back of your head, you're like, what's really going on? A little bit of that.
You know, in the book that I'm writing, I guess I used it as a tool to escape the way our society is currently structured and what African civilizations were like pre them getting colonized. I also feel like, you know, when Africa's story is being told, you know, you usually have stories being told from, you know, a lot of the African states getting their independence between that time and when they were colonized. So what I wanted to try to put together was a story that explored what those societies were like before that time. So I guess it's a way to escape the way the stories of coming out of the continent are being portrayed.
Thank you. And for my storyline, a lot of the premise of Sorghum and Spear, for those who may not have heard of it, it's an African fantasy series about young girls who beat up monsters, and that's kind of our keynote. But the idea of it is that this world is filled with only women. So again, there are no men, and so the idea of the escapism is that there's a warrior women group that are able to procreate and live and die and war amongst each other, but also get together occasionally to fight these large armies of monsters. That said, the escapism for me was to try to, as a writer and as an artist, to try to imagine a space and place where there was a multifaceted sense that I could try to approach and appreciate these characters, knowing that all of the protagonists and antagonists and the relationships and really the main story was going to be outside of my traditional scope without and outside of my lived experience. And so I think the idea of, again, thinking of something fantastic, but also a challenge that made me have to do my research, have to really be cognizant and sensitive and appreciative of a lot of cultural and just societal changes and norms. And again, really what may be encounters to what I think. And so I think part of that escapism of trying to build a world is a reflection of the world that we're in. Again, no matter how fantastic the story, the sense of the human experience is what we all are drawn to. And so being a conduit for that in our work, I felt like that was the sense of not only escapism, but really a lens into how I'm seeing the world as it is now.
I think, like, to sum it up, like what you guys are saying is that art imitates life. So, you know, it's like reflective of whatever aspect you want to focus on. And a lot of times, it is like, a lot of times it is the writer's view of the world and like how they see the world from their lens. So you can't help but to have your own experience in your stories. So I think that's great. And I'm glad you guys are sharing yours with us. So now we're gonna open up for Q&A. So Kriss is gonna hand out the mic. That's okay. And if there are any questions, you can raise your hand.
You know, as a writer, as an artist in general, you know, knowing that really there's modern era of art, realizing that, you know, you're always, somebody's going to look at your art and say, oh, that looks like so-and-so, whoever's, you know. And I think just understand, look at themselves in those characters and see themselves. That's kind of
I guess I would say, don't box your characters in. You know, they're more than skin and black. That's why this is important, to show that black experience is a monolithic. So you just create characters and tell their stories. You know?
Three-dimensional characters, as you were saying, they'll become three-dimensional characters, and you'll be able to really feel like they are one thing when you see them, but there's so much more because you've gone through the work of like creating that depth and picking and choosing these different things. Because, you know, they say there's nothing new under the sun, and there really isn't, but I've seen characters that, because I know that it comes from a variety of inspiration, it becomes kind of its own new thing.
My story is so far back in time. It completely escaped. Read a derivative. But we do explore, themes that you'll find in everyday human life, civilian life, political dynamics, navigating politics. I try to channel Barack Obama sometimes. And how he handled this, his kingdom was getting invaded or whatever, quite a diplomat, but it was very stern. So that's the direction that
Just quickly, I think the idea is collaboration and finding spaces where you can connect your story with other stories or other story writers. And I think in that sense, understanding that your character is reflective or responsive in different scenarios, I feel like that's a way to keep the character ready for the opportunity
Everything you just said. Not seriously collaboration. Especially writers, make back, figure out what the writer wants you to do, what you want to write. You just figure out what you want, figure out what you don't like, what you don't like.
Do you find hard to write for an American audience as coming from Nigeria?
No, I do not. I think, it's as much about the character as it is about, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what our nationality is, but I've been fortunate to travel to a couple of countries, and you find that we have the same fundamentals. We love food, shelter, so everybody wants to get along with their city. Everybody thinks their point of view is right. Everybody will defend if it will be a kingdom, just a big one. So I think people relate quite well, and the good thing is, it's a story that has traveled already. What I'm doing is just
She has a question.
When you're writing, what sets your motivation for how far you want to complete? Like, do you set a date for yourself, or you get a bubble inspiration and you start writing and you're like, okay, well, I wrote all I can do at that time, I'll come back to it later, or you have like a publicist on your back telling you like, get this out. And then the second question is, does Isaiah have copies of those books for purchase? Okay.
I guess for me personally, I'm a farmer. I plan an idea and I springboard off of that. Either when I have something to love or where am I supposed to go? But I have a general idea and there's something that I say, that's actually good, I'm getting I can add on to that. So there's no real law or right way to write. It's just what's more comfortable to do as a
that it kind of depends sometimes on the medium. So right now I have an ongoing webtoon. And so webtoons, you kind of have to get pretty consistent with it. Right now it's more on like a monthly basis. But I think that that kind of lends me to being kind of a hybrid of what you mentioned. So I have like the basic overarching idea of what I want to happen, but I really don't actually write down the script or the details until probably right before I'm about to start it. So then if there's something that I've learned or something that maybe a storyline I feel is sprouting from the previous one, then like I'll start to write that. And I would say it's kind of branched off to be something that I wasn't really expecting. Of course you have life, and at this moment this isn't my like full-time hustle. Well, I want it to be eventually. I think that I just don't put too much pressure on myself to just really stress myself out to make something happen. I do think, granted, you should maybe at least like once a day devote some time. They say that the best way to get faster at reading and complete a book is to read at least 30 minutes a day. I've actually kind of adopted that because if I'm doing something that's fruitful to my project, then I'm gonna look like into the next week and look back and be like, oh, well, I actually did, mark this thing off, check off my checklist of what I'm creating for my story. So that's been kind of helpful for me. And unless you are, working for somebody else, then you can kind of set your own deadlines. And I've, said many apology posts on social media being like, sorry guys, I need to push episodes in the next 2 days or whatever. And people are really super forgiving for that. But if you do want to have a little bit more accountability, I would probably put yourself kind of like a little task force together, collaborate with some other people, so that way you can, maybe have a schedule, because maybe your schedule is dependent on that other person getting something done.
Yeah, I'm self-published, so one the work motivates me to write, to say it's followers and stuff. Once they don't see content getting put out, they start messaging. When is the next comic book coming out? We're not gonna let you sleep. So they're basically the boss.
Just real quick, I just want to see the little video and stuff. So, I'm just listening and enjoying the feedback and stuff.
I guess I want to say that how I write, it's ever evolving. Sometimes and it's very recently I've started writing scripts, but I just have a great ability to keep everything recorded in my head. I think that came from a lot of trauma of mine, because I moved on a lot, but being addicted. And I remember at one point in high school, I lost a lot of writing material that I worked on. So somewhere, I learned to just internalize it to what she was saying. It's a mix between keep it fresh when you get to the material and it manifests itself. I get a more organic presentation of the writing that I'm trying to depict it. In terms of my motivation, it's so anime for me. I have to keep the fire burning, like Deku from Hero. Yeah, plus Ultra, all the way. Actually, funny enough, that resonates with me, but the one that resonates with me harder is Black Clover, Suppression. And you have to constantly do that. You don't know your best until you're challenged to be better than your best. Right now, I'm working on publishing my story, and I don't really have anything physical. You can go look at my story right now,
I'm a tattoo artist as well, so I devoted 10 years of my life to learning the craft of stable income. So I do say having some sort of way to alleviate yourself, I guess putting pressure on yourself to have to create something. You never want to create from that space. I know we try to make these things a hustle, but it's also okay to just like figure it out and try new things, like maybe work a job for a little, or whatever you have to do, like surpass your limit is the mantra.
What's your favorite campaign that you ran?
So definitely, well, I haven't played much on fifth edition. I'm a second and 3.5 kid. But the idea though is, I feel like I've been doing that forever, right? So at least 20 plus years. Favorite campaign setting was Dragonlance. Also Forgotten Realms of Ravenloft, and that's like a great amalgam of one of my fantasy worlds, Spirit, with a little bit of Dark Side. I think a disappointment in Dark Side, so I really start making my own thinking in that sense. I just recall, of course, the cover of it, having a person of color, at least it looked like, on the cover of that, and I was so excited for it. But just looking at the way that they just introduced a lot of the tropes around that, it really was the item of the precursor of that, not big on campaign instead. So from like Neverwinter Night, back in the Diamond Edition, Steve and trying to go on servers. We've always double back and trying to do the traditional tabletop, big round friends, and just trying to make stories.
So yours.
Actually, I have a.
Yeah, I do have some cards.
That works too. So appreciate it.
Type in art by Dylan.
Art soothing shade.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, it's like social media.
Hey, I saw you last night. We danced. Yeah.
You guys are playing good music.
Thank you. I was on here. I think I have a question that's kind of more from what three of you said. Like, I was thinking about what you said about Shango, what you said about being from a rural place, and what you said about IG. I'm from a small town down south. I didn't learn about Shango until I was in Brazil. And I think about how, IG kind of can make this kind of thing accessible, but at the same time, I feel like everything's accessible at our fingertips, but people seem to kind of know less, And I don't know, I'm just wondering about how you all deal with how everything is readily available, but also we still have all these problems with accessibility, in terms of getting the stories that you want out to people in rural place. Where are you from? I'm from Albany, Georgia. Yeah, I don't know if that's a really formed question, but it's just kind of, what I was thinking.
I think, like what you said previously, talking about just to try to do the tabletop with his friends, I think that is important because things are getting so convenient and accessible that it's I'm the type of person, if I have 100 options, I'm just going to choose the 3 and listen. It's probably the one that I always get. So I had 100 options for a reason. And that's kind of like technology. We have so many ways to communicate and we're not easy. So just showing up, it's 85% of the battle. I'd say even for me, in Idol's Gate, the main character's name is Vlad, and it's a thing in my life, I'm thinking for everything. just made it on time. It's like a movie thing. I just make it very and I thought you put that into a character. So he's a bad internet, and I play with the movies online. So I think just making it a point to be aware that there are those places that need that. Because one reason anybody who's seen Bleach, like I love Bleach personally. Brother got locked up. Comes out a year later, he's not really into anime. He's like, yeah, you seen Bleach and stuff? And I'm like, why are you talking about that all of a sudden? And it turns out they're playing it in jails. So yeah, inmates are watching it. Like, so now I have to keep that whole demographic in mind when I'm creating my story, so I know like at least it's gonna reach some people some other places. So just make it that time to show up and also be aware that those places exist too.
And that reminds me of what you said about the farmer, like in a way you can look at accessibility as that seed that grows, you know.
Sometimes I speak from my personal experiences, about things in writing that are very personal, but they also at the same time ironically can relate to specific people, places that I didn't maybe not intended to talk to people about. So they're like, oh, that actually relates to me, something I've been through, and how that experience. I find that interesting, like, it goes beyond yourself and art forms, what you create. You brought it from your mind now to the public space and see it flourish on different people, and it starts to sort of inspire. It's very
And I'm sorry, my partner left. He left a question. Can I ask a question? Okay, thank you. He wanted to know. He texted it to me. Okay, so the first black animated character that he can remember was Panther from Thundercats. Yeah, I wanted to know what's the first animated black character that he has.
That's
Oh, I feel like I just told you. Yeah, oh, you're right.
That's why I said it. That's why I'm trying to turn from Kriss to superhero.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think the first one that I remember was Black Panther.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what's so funny, Shango? Like, what is it called when you go to your priest or priestess and they give you your, what is it called? You know what I'm talking about? They give you your luau. You know what I'm talking about? Damn it. Someone said mine is probably Shango. But
I can distinctly remember the first character I saw as a black animated character was Michelle Hunter. And that was on Nickelodeon. They had a run of Star Wars animated, Star Trek animated series. It was 2 years, but it was the original cast that voiced the show. And so I remember as a kid seeing her as a character and just being enthralled with her. And like her voice and just the command. And at that time, you weren't able to see the original Star Trek. So that was my introduction to the whole show and getting into it. And I just became obsessed with her ever since, right? And in the end with Sword and Spear, I just had a chance to work with her, of course. I said, but I did. And I made her the goddess of my world, right? The idea was just what it meant to see a character like that was in just a stereotypical world, right? So they were like Silver Hulk, right? They had a black character, they were Halloween, right? And so that's the stuff that was in contrast at the time. And so it's just, there's, earlier Hanna-Barbera cartoons like Ricky Rocket, right? I've seen black character. It's some type of archetype, stereotype. So, but for that character in particular, and then finally the real life person behind it, that's what
Because it comes to mentioned, it's just like you see these characters that we idolize, and at a young age, you don't really identify like why these characters look the way they do, or why you don't really see yourself in it, and then it doesn't happen until later when you realize, like for example, the earliest princess that I would maybe relate to was like Mulan, but that's only because I'm half Asian, and I'm just like, but back then that was it. I was like, dang, like, and then now after the fact you see a lot more diversity princesses and things. So I think, well, probably to answer that question, it's definitely smart, but at a certain point, I was like, how can I evolve past that? I don't know, it's weird. But no, yeah, just seeing all of these characters that I can relate to or that you see in yourself, and then I feel like what we've all really done is just make those exact same characters, but then make them like us.
For me, I think reading like I said, and it's all about obviously Black Panther for sure. But and I don't have a lot of characters who have necessarily even their own like African American percent, but they have color to some degree, so I relate to a lot of them. I definitely really like to Spider-Man. I see you in the background. But because I never really, even though he was, Peter Parker, he was white, but because he had a mask with full body, we didn't really see who he was, so he could be anybody. I think that's actually one of the things that we said that he could be intentional, but anybody could have that mask. So I identified with Spider-Man a lot as a kid. I used to have Spider-Man costume on everywhere I went. Because I felt like I was Peter Parker, and I could relate to him on a personal basis. So I often saw myself in characters that wasn't even necessarily Black or like X-Men also.
Yeah.
Those kind of experiences.
I'll say the same thing. Don't care mosquito. Everybody was but hey Ronald, what's his name? Jared. Crazy. Baby's kids, like I said.
Ah, Baby's kids, that's mine. Yeah.
What else? That's it. Oh, Susan from Rugrats. There's a lot of classic cartoons from the 90s that like, there's a lot of characters in that.
I guess I'd say that, like what you were saying about Spider-Man, I don't know if it's because I grew up drinking. I just think how whitewashed the world is. And so I don't really harp on obvious things, like, hey, there's nothing for white people on the show. I was born in 93, and coming in, that was just the landscape of Friends or Seinfeld. That was the medium. But when I think back to the first characters, beautiful Captain Planet, Black Kid, and like that's crazy because that was his archetype. That's what they did back then. So it's like Captain Planet is probably one of the best living examples of the universe because they had kids from like an Asian kid, Hispanic kid, Indian kid, Black kid, white kid. But I kind of identify with the white kid. It was like cool, like biker jacket guy. Like it's just like this one. I think it's really cool that this panel is existing because it's an example that will have characters to us. Even playing video games like Streets of Rage. There's 3 characters. It's a girl, she's white. It's a black guy and a white guy. I played with a white guy. The black guy was like too dark for me, really. Like he was like the brown crayon. Like I could never use the brown crayon. Nobody I knew looked that brown. I didn't like it. So I just didn't color in my characters brown. They were just the color of the paper, And now we have characters with different nuance in their implementation in terms of skin color. But I've always related to the experiences first, and then to see where the landscape of things are. I do see that us being represented is increasing with stories of people that have the same skin or my sisters. I have a really big family, but it's so hard pressed when you put a black person in something like old school. They were just really dark, and like, not everybody's like that dark. And there's an even difference in treatment for being that dark. So they're like neglecting certain experiences as totally sake of presenting the truth. Yeah, I'm glad we'll have more black person.
Are there any more questions?
I would consider like I've noticed a lot
in general, it's always just like, oh, European fantasy versus like I have recently learned about Native American monsters like skinwalkers. Like, what? Why did I not know about that already? Why isn't there like, other settings? So have you thought about like doing like your own like an Egyptian one or Arabian Nights kind of thing?
Well, it's a great question, and the precursor to that, like I know there's a fantastic indigenous setting. I don't know if it's directly around 5th edition. It's called Coyote and Crow. That is around and it's developed, created, and implemented by an indigenous game development team. But to answer your question, I absolutely have. For our Orbital Sorghum Spear, we're actively working on a 5th edition translation for that. So we've already developed the language, and we have some additional stuff that we've already been working on. That we've already started beginning that journey. So we'll probably have that next year, like a solid 5th edition book, probably DragonCon 2023. The idea is if not have like that full template out and done, that we should have that book done. So we're actively